Thanks everyone for joining our MOPs exchange sessions today. This is our very informal peer-to-peer webinar where we share our real world wins and challenges that MOPs leaders have. Um, I'm Charlotte, Global Head of Growth at Soden Solutions. I'm joined by my colleague Andrew, and we're thrilled to be talking to Louise Winch today, a MOPs leader with deep experience in digital transformation, optimization, and operational excellence. And Louise, in your role at O2 across both business and consumer, you've helped turn very messy data into customer-centric gold. Um, we're very happy to have you on. And just throughout this session, feel free to ask questions. We want to make it as engaging as possible. You can drop some questions in the chat, and we'll try and answer as many questions as we can as we go along. So, Louise, thanks for
Yeah, thanks,
joining
Charlotte.
today. We're going to start off. I've got some questions. I know you love this topic. So to start with, what is data fragmentation and why is it such a big issue in marketing today?
It's a great question because for me, data is the cornerstone of great marketing. And data fragmentation is basically what everyone in marketing should be trying to avoid. But the way the world has changed so much when it's being automated, I would say in the last 10 years, what we're finding is data sits in pockets across the business. It's not standard, it's different. People forget it's there. And it's just not the optimum way of working. So for me, data fragmentation is what everyone needs to move away from and pull that together into a standard way of working. So I think most people will find data sits in pockets around the business, but that's not ideal.
Okay. And once you know your data is fragmented, what do you do and how do you go about organizing it?
It's a really good question because there's so many different things you can do with data, so many different approaches. But I always like to think about what your ultimate goal is. So, what are you trying to achieve? And then think back to your data. So, for me, a complete understanding of all your data flows, the mappings, what data is available and where it's coming from, just stop and think about all of those key things and start thinking about how you can see it as a whole and pull it together. So you can work on subsets of data quite happily, but you really want a clear view. So the customer being at the heart of what we're trying to do, it'd be great to see everything which was customer centric. So for me, it's about getting that pure view of what's happening and then start developing from there. So that would be your starting point for sure.
Louise, I mean, I've worked with you for quite a number of years, at VMO too, and I know how good you are at this. But have you seen any particularly clever or any simple ways that you've managed to uncover hidden data silos? Because I mean, there's so much data held, within enterprise, customers or in your clients, and it is held throughout the business. Have you found any clever
Yeah.
ways to uncover it?
I don't think there's anything clever, to be honest, with this. A lot of it is just really going through the motions. I think one of the things I found that works, though, is obviously data means more to some people than others. But
Mm.
if you start preaching about the value of data, or maybe not even preaching, but just showing the value of data and getting people to understand that it is part and parcel of the successful business these days, knowing what data you have, how you're going to use it, and recording what customers are doing so you can get the benefits. So, in the past, this is going back many, many years now, when we worked with sales trying to do lead generation, to get a clear view of what was going on and the engagement, we were doing really well with the digital footprint. But when sales were going in and seeing customers, they weren't actually adding that into the engagement tracker. So you had half a picture. So by showing them the value of seeing that big picture and then how we can prioritize resource around what was going on with that data, they started to understand that if we join stuff up and we can work together, then there was actually a good return for them as well. And I think that was a big sea change in my career, just getting people on board. And I think the more you can help people understand how data helps us as a business to make those informed decisions, it just starts, snowballing from there.
How how did you
Also,
sort of sorry, I was about to say
no, 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 Andrew, because we're going to ask.
how did you start those conversations with the sales team? Because obviously, in some places the sales and marketing teams are not often aligned. How would you go about, aligning that to be able to have those conversations?
Yeah, first and foremost for me, if I look back at how we achieved it previously, was not many places document best practice. So, what does good look like and why do you do stuff? And if you do that, I think people then start to understand, okay, if I stop annotating fields that say don't call, he's called Robert, but let's call him Bob, and putting that into a database, say something like Salesforce, if they understand the ramifications of doing something like that, which helps them but doesn't help the greater good, then they start thinking big picture. So get your best practice documented, however you want to work. And lots of people work in different ways, but as you standardize and you come up with a way of working that drives the business, I think that's your first point. So if you have your data flows there as a business, you know where stuff's coming from, but then how should everyone that uses that data work with it and use it? That's a really good, strong point to start then working with sales to say, look, we use this in this way. If you could help us do this, we'll achieve so much more. So I think it's those building blocks and showing and proving, but also case studies as well. So once something's worked really well and you share that with some salespeople and say, this salesperson did this and look how amazing they are. People then tend to get on the bandwagon, I found, because they want some of that glory as well. So it's
Yeah.
one of the things that we found. If you can show what good looks like, you can show the value in doing something, people then do get behind it. But again, it's reinforcement. So show them what's good and then keep telling them why it is good. And eventually you get there. You might end up with one or two that just dig their heels in. But if the masses are following, you normally get what you need.
Yeah. And you're literally like mapping out what systems hold data, the fields and how they're connected, and you're providing understanding across where some teams might not have a broader understanding before about what's working. So I guess you're showing them exactly what the data map looks like and bringing them into the conversation.
Yeah, just being transparent because data people aren't really that engaged with unless they have to be. I mean, I love data, and I mean, that's a strange thing to admit, but the power of data is just brilliant. But if it's not your forte, if you're charming and you're a salesperson, you're out there pressing in the flesh, you're doing all this great stuff, and to you, that's just stuff that happens in the background, it hasn't got the same sort of importance for you. But if you know that it will help, by seeing those good life and real world case studies where people have achieved so much more. I think inch by inch you get there. So yeah, knowing what's good and being transparent about why these things matter really helps.
And where does data governance come into all this, and what should it look like in a MOPS-led organization?
So governance is really key, and we probably won't need to go down to the consent level here because I think that's a whole different webinar we could probably cover on that. But just having clear views of how you use data, who owns that data, how often that data will be refreshed. All of these things, when you think about it, make a lot of sense. But I bet in most companies, no one really understands it. There isn't that holistic view of data. Some people know bits and pieces here, but no one's really got that umbrella view of everything and pulls it together for the sort of greater good. And I think that's one of the key things that everyone should be doing, because if you have that foundation, then you can use that data and trust it. So for me, governance is about ensuring that when people use that data, they can trust it. So governance covers so many different things for me. So your policies about how you get data, how you delete data. A lot of people don't delete stuff. And I remember when we worked with Sojourn in the early days, we ended up with so many Eloqua assets. And then we were running out of space, and we were like, oh, we should probably have thought about the deletion program at the beginning as well. And that piece of governance was missing for us. But you learn with governance, you learn if your things are going wrong, then you should probably be changing what you're doing as well. But there's so many aspects of governance, but it's so crucial to making sure that that data is trustworthy that you're going to use.
And you, I don't know when it was set up, but you were part of a cross-functional government committee. It seemed to like grow um, over time.
The Information Governance Committee, that one.
yeah, and within O2.
Yeah.
So, because I guess for some, it's like, well, where do you start? Have you got a committee within your organization already set up, or where do you start, like, to start this governance practice for teams?
So again, if we go back to the sort of best practice guide, I think that's probably your starting point for governance. So what is it we're going to do and why? And then if you want to change something, what do you need to make sure you're aware of? So new products coming online. One of the sort of real life examples I've seen, which happened, and it's such a small thing, but it's had such a big impact. So if you bring on a new product, if you have a central CDP where you can see who your customers are, if you don't have any product code for a new product, then let's say you try and use of lead generation, you get some customers, but you then can't exclude customers because the product code shows that there's no customers at all because no one's thought to add it. Things like that with governance. When you go back to Information Governance Council, which is what you were talking about earlier, Charlotte, it was looking at things. So if you're doing something new, have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? Some things like selling data, even. So in the past, O2 has had a policy of not selling data. We look after data and we do the right thing by it. But some companies had data and they wanted to sell it in the past as well. So is that allowed? Why would you do that? What is the impact of doing that on your customers? So I would start small really with data governance. It's just making sure that you've got the best practice so everyone understands what good looks like before you start doing anything, but then have the relevant people from the key areas. So not just marketing, you probably need IT, you might even need legal, you might need product owners. Whoever's got a part to play should be part of that governance and making sure any decisions that come are documented and approved really. And but it shouldn't be a harsh place to exist because I know some people found it quite tough when we ran information governance, but ideally, it was to make sure we do things in the right way and got them right first time rather than launch something. Because there are lots of issues with customers. If you get something wrong, the reputational impact can be just dramatic or just you losing them. I mean, that's what you don't want, really. You want customers to love you for a long time. So you just need to make sure you're set up to succeed. And I think the governance piece really helps with that. But again, I think it will differ at every company, what size you are, who your customers are, because B2B is really different beast from B2C. And obviously there's different legal ways of doing consent as well.
Yeah. And you mentioned CDPs. So I know not everyone has a CDP. Many do have data lakes. Um, so how do these fit in?
So data lakes are great, I think, for analysts if you want to see long-time trends. It's a great place to have a stash of data, but it doesn't really then help you as much as marketing as a CDP. For me, a CDP brings out the elements that you need and you can segment and target effectively with a CDP. So Salesforce, Adobe, Telium, all these different types of um, platforms really help you with your marketing, where data lake is, I mean, it's a lake, it's a vast amount of data. So I think it's great having them, but for practical reasons, CDPs really help you. But obviously, they're costly. So some people can survive with a data lake, pulling out information and use it for marketing. But I think in this digital, fast-moving world that we've got now, having a CDP of some type really helps, especially with the automation and with AI and insights being really important for effectiveness. I think those CDPs would continue to develop and give us what we need sort of further down the line.
And you mentioned before about um, the data is everything, clean data. So have you seen successful CDP use cases without perfect data hygiene?
For me, data hygiene is just so important. I mean, you select the wrong data or you can't get to the data properly, and then a campaign which you might have spent months on just falls over. So you can have the best campaign, but the bad data will stop it being successful. So I think always you need to be sure about what you've got. And people use data dictionaries to document this as well. Even things like free text fields, do you want those? Are they useful for you? Or should you lock fields down? I've just had a recent example where I've got a personal email address, which isn't a Hotmail or a standard one, and it wouldn't accept my email address because the rules around that didn't like it. So I couldn't actually do what I needed to do. And as a person in that circumstance, it isn't just about being data as incorrect, it's about how that data is received as well, I think. So you need to make sure all of these things are customer friendly and correct.
Yeah. And actually, so bring it
I,
back to that customer
I
cent
can
Oh,
I just
sorry,
really,
Andrew. Yeah, you
I'm
go first.
just going to quickly jump in there. I've had a similar thing this week, which I know is not B2B, but with Nintendo, where I've lost access to an old email address, and the only way you can update your email address is by getting a verification code to your old email address.
Yeah.
They have no way around that. I mean, that is crazy.
Yeah,
You
the
can't.
customer experience for that just doesn't work for you, does it? So
No, not
you'll
at
end
all.
up feeling put out, won't you? And then you might go somewhere else because you can't progress it. And that's what we don't want. We want customers to find it easy to work with us always. So they love us. I mean, that's the best thing. If everything works smoothly behind the scenes, no one really notices. It's when they don't work, that's when it goes wrong.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean,
absolutely.
because, yeah, nothing's in isolation anymore. Like our experiences, we want better timing, like fewer gaps in communication. As customers, we're bouncing around, but we need the data to follow.
Yeah, I
Uh,
mean, customers are very clever. I mean, you are a customer for different things outside of this world. I imagine you've got high expectations, Charlotte, because you know what's possible. And
yeah,
a lot of customers are very astute, so you can't fob them off. You've really got to deliver on things that they expect as a hygiene factor these days.
yeah. What advice would you give to teams trying to join the dots across their data systems? You've mentioned it
Again, I
briefly,
mentioned
yeah, just a
earlier
bit more into
about,
the details,
oh,
sorry.
God, again, Charlotte.
Oh, yeah, you'd mentioned it at a high level, so just a bit more into the detail about joining those dots between their data systems.
Yeah, so again, coming back to my point earlier, this whole Stephen Covey thing about starting with the end in mind, what are you there to do? Because you could do so many things because there's so, but I always think focus on the end and then figure that out. So start simple. I mean, look at what you've got. What data do you have? Things like, what's important. Is tenure important to you? Do you reward customers because they've been with you for 5, 10 years? Is that a good thing? So yes, no. If it is, where's that data going to come from? Is that data coming through how you expect to use it? Will there be any problems? Who's responsible for it? There's all questions, how, what, why, when. It's if you start again mapping out your data flows, so what you've got available, and then how you want to use it and documenting that. I mean, it sounds very simple when you say it like that. It's a mammoth task, and it doesn't just happen once. You have to continually update it and make sure it's right. But just having that visibility so you can communicate with people, I think is key. So I would start there and say, and then evangelize about data because people do work in silos, regardless of where you are within a business. So if they're like a new product coming, ask them early on to incorporate what you need for your marketing in their plan. So it gets delivered. So often something gets delivered, and then you don't know where the data's going to come from, what it looks like, how long it's going to get there. And there's often queues of work. Things don't happen overnight. If there's so much work going on, what's the priority and stuff? It's always good to plan properly and have stuff scheduled in. So I think it's just looking at all the moving parts and making them work for you.
Yeah.
Do you have any sort of data nightmares from your career? I mean, I remember doing a particular contract for I'm going to say a high street bank, so as not to name brands, but they basically had a merger and acquisition, brought two data platforms together. On a one, which was like a description field, like a free text, there was information in there where the staff on the desks had typed in literal information about people's pet names and husbands and this and this. So when they came in, they could see and know about them, to talk to them in the front. Whereas the other the other company that where the data is being merged, they had the same system, but they'd use the same field for deceased. so they knew whether or
Yeah.
not somebody was dead. I mean, it was quite comical, but it wasn't, if you know what I mean. Do you have any particular memories, of anything that you've worked on that's been a bit of a nightmare from a data perspective?
Well, I do. I mean, I can tell you some things maybe, but some I probably shouldn't. But I mean, on the
Oh
simplest
no,
thing,
they're the good bits, Louise. We need the
I
bits you
know.
shouldn't.
No,
Yeah.
I'll share some bits, some that are funny. So the whole what you see is what you get thing. People did not get that in our early days of automation, I can tell you. So I sadly used to go through and correct our database. And in the early days, it was quite labor intensive. And then we got a really great data management team and we did much better. But having Brain as a name instead of Brian, guess how many versions of that we had in our database? I mean, dear brain. I mean, they might have thought they were intelligent from that, but I think if their name was Brian, they would probably feel not so happy about receiving that.
That's brilliant.
First name, last name transpose, that used to happen all the time. People just didn't think anything of it. But your point about that annotation, that used to be a really big thing because people used to mark up within customer service mainly. Because when you've got a system that's accessible for many people, they'll use it how they think it should be used, not how everyone thinks it should be used. So, yeah, so things like Robert, known as Bob in brackets, but your deceased thing, I have definitely seen marked up, this person is dead. And that would come through and not look good. The other interesting thing is where you have mixed accounts. So it might be say dear Louise to me, but it might be in my husband's email address because of just how we set something up. So that happens actually with Sky for us. So the billing relationship is with me, so it's in my name, but he set it up. So he put his email address. And we had often issues with that where things had gone through in the wrong name or been corrected. So there's a lot of issues that can arise, and you really have to think through the use of the data. So one of the biggest things I've seen, which I think is a mistake, is to have identity based off a single email address that can only be used once, because you might have multiple accounts, but you want them all to come to you. And I think this isn't obviously a funny one, but that's a real problem for a lot of people because you then get stuck. You don't have sort of an account ID other than that. And I think that's one of the things people fall foul of a lot, and they need to work around that.
Yeah,
On
that's
a on
it.
another note, which I know we've not really touched on, but is a huge, I'm going to say buzzword, but I'm not even sure it's even a buzzword these days. I think it's just normal. Where do you see data and AI intersecting going forwards? Because I know, there's so much AI coming into the marketing ops space, dealing with campaigns and stuff, but it is also starting to touch on data, like you've just, mentioned, like merging data, bases together and all the rest of it. Where do you see it going in the next, 12
Yeah,
to
it's a
18
really
months?
good question. And I got asked this quite recently. And I think I would flip it because if you try and start with AI, going, AI can do this, I will then do this with my business. I think always think, what am I trying to do for my business? And then can AI help? So start small and then find cases where it could be applicable and work from there. Because otherwise, you would probably need hundreds of AI specialists coming and pitching, going, I think you can do this, I think you can do this. And I think you'd get swamped. I think you need to be focused on so things like translation. If you wanted to do a global campaign, there's some tools out there that will pretty much take your campaign and transform it. And it used to perhaps take weeks to be able to do this with specialists, but you might then end up just having it peer reviewed now, and it could be done in a day where it could have been a month. So there's definitely lots of opportunity, but I think we need to pick them off as we go. I don't, there's not a magic bullet which is just going to change the way we work. And I think we'll always rely on good people. We need the creatives, we need the people doing the work. But if you work with AI, you might just end up working smarter.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes
Have you got
sense.
any good ideas, Andrew?
Oh, I've got loads, but I'm not so sure they're probably relevant for this topic.
Yeah, definitely around what's the use case that you're trying to solve
Yeah.
before diving in and seeing something shiny.
Yeah, can
with
get so
AI.
excited with all of
Yeah,
these
it's
things.
there's so many things. I mean, I jump quite a lot on thinking that a problem might get solved, and then as you get into the weeds, it hasn't actually solved the problem. And then you're jumping to the next thing, and then I'm like, oh, I need to step back and yeah, think what actually are we, what's the challenge, what the use
Yeah.
case is. Yeah. Um, so what's one thing you wish more marketing leaders understood about data?
I just think about the value of it, really. One of the things that I think's happened, if you have a well-run team, people don't really get, like you say, into the weeds of things because they don't have to. So, how do people know what's happening in the background? A lot of stuff happens that people don't see. People look in data and ability and sort of the operational side of marketing are the unsung heroes a lot of the time. And I think leaders, not just in marketing, but across business, really need to understand without that foundation, then the business won't be as successful as it could be without it. So yeah, I think that's the thing. I just think people need to understand the value it brings to a business.
And so if you said, right, there's one thing I want every MOPS leader here to act on, what would it be?
I think fundamentally it is it's staying close to data. I think as a leader, you often think it's there, it's working, it's good, and you move on to something shiny and new. But I think it's about staying close to it because if you get this bit right, everything follows. So as be hands-on. I think that's the thing. Know what's happening with that data. Be comfortable with it. Because if you have that trust, and a lot of this comes back to me about having that trust, then that data is great for insights, it's great for targeting, it's great for ensuring customers are happy when you contact them because you're doing the right things by them. So, yeah, I think that's probably it. I mean, staying close to it. And I've done that throughout my career. I mean, I've been very hands-on and I corrected those brains to Bryant's because I didn't want them in the database many years ago. But for me now, I'm still very hands-on. If we get a new system, where does the data come from? Who does what with it? I'm all over it, but then I back off and let the people that do the work do it. But yeah, just get close to it and stay close because then you know that everything's going to work out well.
And what would you say it would look like in terms of a roadmap? Would you say you need to like plan out a 12-month roadmap, or is it doesn't have to be like thinking ahead that much and planning? It's about picking one use case and process and building up.
I think it will vary in each instance. So there's so many different things you can do, and it all depends really on your data maturity. A lot of consultants like to come along and ask you a lot of questions, and they'll say you've done well with this and you've done well with that. But again, go at your own pace, see what there is to be done, and lots of companies have got to where they are just by doing things piecemeal. So they know things work, but there are probably some low-hanging fruit things that can be done. There's probably some major projects and potentially start a lot of things because you can have different owners for things, but as long as it's in one big program, many people can get involved. But for me, the fundamentals are making sure you know what your governance is, knowing what best practice is, and then just making sure the business understands how data is being used. And so you can also then communicate that to your customers as well.
Yeah, it sounds like you were very good. I know this at showcasing out what you were doing and internally what you were doing, which is good to showcase successes along the way.
We always used to say that, data doesn't belong to one area within the business, data belongs to everyone. So if you saw something that was incorrect, you don't just ignore it, you either flag it to a team to fix it. And we were very key to make sure people knew they could go to back in the day about changing things or just learning what the right way of doing stuff was so that then you pull together as a business to deliver because I think that working together thing with data is just key. Without people on the same page, it's never going to come together effectively.
Yeah.
Is that kind of down to the whole, does the company trust the data or the people who interpret it? And the chicken and egg scenario, it's a case of once you've got to build that trust in the data that you've built in order for people to then be able to rely on both, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these things go hand in hand. You can't just go in one day and say, trust the data. You've really got to go through the motions and make sure everyone understands how data is so important. But I think these days, as a customer for most things, you'd know how your email's being used, you know, the marketing that might come to you, how you stop it if you want no phone calls, and how you do preferences for things. You know, you're very good probably these days as a customer to say what you want. And I think that really helps us now for companies because we're like, okay, so that's my personal preference. How do we work as a company? What can we do for others? And bringing that together really helps.
Yeah, I know in the past, owning the final call, either the data, is it, I'm going to get my acronyms wrong. Are they known as a HIPPO, the highest paid person's opinion? So that the difference between, building that data that you trust and just going along with what you're told, I suppose once you've proven that the data works and all the rest of it, it makes those decisions a lot easier.
Yeah, and then you get into things like Tableau, where you layer in other platforms to really help that data work for you. So data sits behind the scenes, but then once you make it visible and transparent for people who then can get more benefit from it, that really helps. And then I think if everyone sees the same view, so when people are talking, if they're forecasting, they can say, I think this will happen, and somebody might have the same figures from a different area. I mean, that's the kind of thing where people really start believing the data and trusting it is when people look at it in different ways and don't come up with completely different perspectives just because they've cut it in a different way or made it work in a different way. You know, the data is the data. It should be the same across the business, and we should all have access to it, whatever we need it for.
Single point data. I think that goes back to the customer data platform things again, doesn't it? It's making sure that all the data is in one particular place and easily
Yeah,
accessible,
yeah,
and
Yeah.
measuring what
And
matters,
that
not
insight
just
is the
what's easiest.
exciting bit. Yeah. I
Sorry, yeah, I was
love,
just
I
saying
love like seeing the insights. I know we've got Essie on the phone. I mean, she could talk for hours as well about measurement KPIs, but even like the data health side becomes really fascinating with what you can do. We had a lot of Tableau reports that were built out, Louise, wasn't there? That was
yeah,
very actionable for the teams in terms of like what the campaign teams could do, but then what also they could do for the data
yeah.
hygiene
Simple things
side.
like, let's say you have a database of 5,000 companies. That sounds really good because you want to bring in business. But then how many of them can you reach? So then if you go down and look at how many have got a usable email and it's 20%, all of a sudden your reach has fallen dramatically. So having the right contacts, having the right channels to reach them. So do you have a proper phone number? And is it set up properly? Does that, and then obviously email addresses change, people leave companies, they might get married and their name changes. How are you going to process that? So if an email bounces, do you just remove it? Do you highlight it? Do you reach out to customer service to talk to them if that person ever calls in to change it? What are your processes? You know, what are the touch points that you can have in place that help you keep your data tip top? Because that's really what you want. You want it to act as gold for you. I mean, it's so valuable. And if you get it right, things work smoothly. And if you get it wrong, they
Yeah.
don't.
We're doing a lot of talking. If anyone's got some questions or wants to, well, please add them in the chat, um, and we'd be happily to answer them as we go. And I just lost my train of thought because I was actually going to ask another question,
Well, I'll
and I
I'll
had
jump
a
in at
memory of
that
us
point,
working.
Charlotte.
So Andrews, yeah, that's why it's always good to have us both.
I will just jump in on this one. I mean, just touching on what you've just said about, data churn and all the rest of it. There are still a lot of people out there, which it's one of my pet frustrations, who would still rather have 10,000 contacts in a database or 100,000 contacts in a database than get rid of, 30-40% of them that are unreachable. They'd rather keep them in there. And when you're looking at, email, service platforms that charge you by volume rather than,
Yeah.
send, you know, have you ever come across a way of being able to convince people that it is actually better to remove the data that is not right rather than just keep it in there?
Yeah, I think that's where data principles come in. What is important to you? Sort of what's your North Star? So if you think about you send to 10,000 people, the open rate is going to be really low if they're not viable. Whereas if you have engaged people and you send to them and you target really effectively, the messages can be much better as well. So I would always advocate for having engaged people, the right data. Data health is so important to make sure your time and your money is spent doing the right things.
Yeah, no, that makes
Um,
sense.
Andrew, you've got podcasts and relevant blogs or any more material if anyone's interested to dive into anything in more detail.
Yeah, we have an awful lot of articles on our website. We've got the podcast, which I know you just mentioned, and obviously the next MOPS exchange. So lots of things to divulge. Divulge, that's not the right word, is it? It's to jump into and have a good read through. There's loads of things on a lot of our channels, so please feel free to take a look.
Brilliant. And just lastly, what's next, Louise? You've
But
achieved
for
so much.
me,
What's next?
oh, who knows, really? I mean, just keep the fight going, get that data there. Good data is intentional, isn't it? I think we all need to invest
Yeah.
our time and energy in that, and then good things will follow.
Yeah. Brilliant. Cool. Thank you so much for your time today and thanks
You're
for
welcome.
joining.
Yeah, thanks, Louise.
Thanks.
Thanks everybody for
Thanks,
joining.
everyone.
Take
Great.
care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.